Hello, friends. We hope you can see and hear us, and welcome to Hunter College in this format in live Zoom, which you are watching on YouTube. My name is Yasha Klotz. I teach Russian literature at Hunter College, as some of you know, and it's my greatest honor and pleasure to start our series today, the series which is called Russian and East European Cultures at Hunter. Today with the event that is of utmost importance and couldn't be more topical, not only in the global context, but also for the courses we are offering to our students this semester, including Russian women writers and many others. So our series has been devoted to artists from Eastern Europe, Russia, and other places, as well as from around the corner. And it has always tried to give them a chance, opportunity, and platform to present the work for Hunter students and CUNY students and to New Yorkers at large. And today, this is the first event that in our series this semester called Belarus Striking, Voices from the Belarusian Uprising. The event will be moderated by Valzhyna Mort, a poet, professor of creative writing at Cornell University, whose book, Music for the Dead and Resurrected, whose new book under this title is coming out in early November from a very prestigious publishing house, Farrar, Straus and Giroux. And of course, we are looking forward to welcoming Valzhyna and Hunter once again with the book talk and reading. All other participants will be introduced in greater detail by Valzhyna, who, as I said, is going to be our moderator. But I'm equally looking forward to welcoming, hopefully, all of you at some point to Hunter again. And Daria Zhuk, the filmmaker who has joined us today, has already been our guest with her wonderful film. So on this note, once again, welcome. What we will do is we will have the panel discussion, and at the end of our event, you will be able to ask questions in YouTube chat, which we will take as far as the time permits. So once again, it's our greatest honor and pleasure to see you, to welcome you to Hunter, and thank you very much for joining us from wherever you are. Thanks again. Valzhyna, over to you.
Thank you, Yasha. Thank you, Hunter College. Hello and welcome, everybody. In August, the Belarusian dictator claimed an improbable victory in presidential elections. His opponents were jailed. Amid ample evidence of systematic fraud, Belarusians took to the streets. They were beaten and detained by riot police. United Nations have documented 450 cases of torture, though I'm sure that this number is much higher, and not a single investigation has been opened to this date. People come out again all over the country in smaller groups during the week and in larger marches during the weekend. In a situation where the government has completely abandoned the law, Belarusians are carrying out a law-abiding revolution. Today, I will talk to 5 Belarusian activists from different spheres of life. I will start with questions I've prepared, but we're very keen on hearing from you and sharing your questions with our guests. I will now introduce our guests briefly. Please find full biographies of our participants on our Hunter College event webpage. Belarus-born director Daria Zhuk has just returned to New York City from Minsk. Her debut feature film, Crystal Swan, was Belarus's first entry into the Academy Awards Best Foreign Language category in 22 years. Andrei Zavaley is an LGBT activist and theater producer. His projects are focused on raising awareness about homophobic and transphobic hate crimes, as well as an independent theater scene in Belarus. Tanya Kapitonova is a freelance photographer and journalist. For the past 6 months, she has been working as a news photographer and has been covering election campaigns and protests in Belarus. Olga Shparaga is a professor at the European College of Liberal Arts in Minsk and a well-known public intellectual. Her first book, Community After Holocaust, On the Way to the Inclusion Society, was shortlisted for the Book of the Year in 2018. And the prize-winning Belarusian conductor, Vitaly Alexeyonok, has been musical director at the Abaka Orchestra at the University of Munich. Having also worked at such top venues as the Bavarian State Opera, this summer Vital has led Minsk Philharmonics in their outdoor protest concerts. Well, welcome everybody. We know how demanding and intense it is right now to be in Minsk or to have just returned from somewhere in Belarus. So we're very grateful for your presence here and for your voices contributing to this discussion. I will start right away with the first question. A salt miner, Yuri Korzun, has recently handcuffed himself to his mining equipment. In his address, he says, On September 8th, I turned 42. All of my conscious life, I have lived under the Lukashenko's regime. Here's my question. How old were you when Lukashenko came to power? Do you feel that you've been consciously preparing for this uprising for decades? Or is this a new and different turn in your civil engagement? I have to say that Olga and I met first about 15 years ago in Warsaw, Poland, and it was already the age of Lukashenko. And here we are, still here.
Thank you very much for invitation. Thank you to Yasha and Valzhyna. I was 20, and about preparing, I would say that I wasn't prepared for this activization of our society. Of course, I can see that there were new processes in our society, in civil society, during the last 10 years, in LGBT crisis, feminist crisis, social project crisis. But at the moment, we have new processes in the society as whole, and it's new for me.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. And I was just 4 years old when Lukashenko came to power, and basically my whole life was as well followed by this nice, ugly dictator. I would say when I was 16, I already was witnessing the jeans revolution in 2006, and I was quite inspired by it. A lot of young people were taking part, but I personally didn't know how could I engage myself personally. And then I studied in St. Petersburg in Russia. And when I left Belarus, I was studying piano performance. I was super angry on my own country and my own nation. Like, why all of you are so weak? Why you are so frustrated? Why cannot you stop it? And so on. But after I graduated and came back, I realized it's now, I should ask this question myself. And I started slowly to become more and more civically engaged, and activism and cultural projects. And I would say last decade, it's really a very slow transformation, slow evolution of the whole society. And I'm quite inspired and proud to be part of it at the moment.
Thank you for having me on this in this wonderful company, Valzhyna and Yasha. I was 14 when Lukashenko came to power, but for me, kind of the turning point was when I was 16 and I saw the Chernobylsky Shliach, and I saw my friends being picked up. Kind of, it was like the turning point off of the path of being politically active altogether. So, I really, it was such a defining moment for me when I remember describing it, putting it down on paper as a scene in the script, and some of my American film mentors reading it and saying like, oh my God, this is so melodramatic. I hope you're not planning to film this. This is like not, it didn't look real on paper, because it was just such a scene of obvious rights, human right violations, and like they just felt, the justice was missing in this simple moment. And so for me, that, it was quite a surprise. I have to say, it was the coronavirus for me was like, wow, or just sitting with my thoughts and thinking about what world I want to live in was such a surprising energy accumulation that kind of resulted in being engaged starting in May this year in the political process. I just actually never expected to be so. I wanted to make art about politics, or I understand that art is political, but it was never. I never took an active civil stance, I would say, till this year.
So I was 3 years old when Lukashenko came to power, and actually I wasn't that politically active. I come also from this small town close to Minsk, and I was not that conscious actually in all this political process. But the first and the last moment where I was politically active before this summer was 2010. was at the square 2010 on December 19th, and I was just hoping, and I hoped to see some differences, and this was the moment where I tried to understand what is going on, and it was also the moment where I became quite frustrated after this square, because about 700 people were detained on this evening, and I just left 15 minutes before it happened, and just all this process were quite terrifying. And this summer was the first one where I started to interest myself again, where I started to try to find a hope for our country again. And this summer and all these processes were still quite surprising for me. And this is absolutely new for me to understand what Belarus now is, what Belarusian people are doing right now. And I wasn't that conscious actually in what is happening right now.
Hi, everyone. I was a year and a half when Lukashenko came to power, and till this year I never took part in any revolution, because when there were elections in 2006, I was studying in school. When it was 2010, I just finished school, and I was not in the context so much. Then the elections in 2015 were quite calm, because of different reasons, and only this year me and lots of my friends became so aware of all the situation, and and only this year I became interested in politics.
Yes, and if I may just thank Tanya, you once again, because it was Tatiana's photographs that we saw in the beginning together with the Kupalinka song.
Thank you, everybody, again. It is wonderful to meet all of you Lukashenko babies. Andrei called him a nice, ugly dictator. And sometimes instead of calling him the last dictator of Europe, I choose the formulation Europe's favorite dictator, because I think if you have to have a dictator, which could be pretty nice, then Belarus is a really wonderful little dictatorship. It's neat, it's clean, all right, and it's completely absurd. So I would like to continue this discussion talking about your contribution to this protests and your role in this resistance movement. After the elections, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya was forced to leave the country. Recently, there was an attempt to force Maria Kolesnikova to cross the border into Ukraine in order to present her as fleeing. She's on trial tomorrow, as far as I know, and has already requested her lawyer to bring red lipstick. Lawyer and politician, and somebody I know from middle school, Maxim Znak, has been arrested in his apartment. He managed to send a message to his friend, masks, before masked men entered his apartment and arrested him. And yet the protest started without any central coordination, and they continue seemingly without any direct leadership. It looks like each and every one of the thousands of people is doing a little bit every day. How do you see your role in the resistance? What can a single person, a professor, a musician, a producer, a photographer, a filmmaker, a scholar do and has done? Could you describe and speak about ways in which you participate?
Yeah, I suppose that all of us has different ways to take part in this resistance. As for me, I'm author and philosopher, and I'm preparing a lot of texts and interview, first of all, for European audience. And it's very important because our situation and revolution in progress is special, and it's difficult to understand what's going on. And then the second is protests, our taking part in protests. then information, because it's very important to have contact with different people, different groups, and to understand, to clear the situation, to discuss situation with different people, and to help different people in different groups. And I'm a part of this coordinational council. I will speak about this, and I'm in the feminist group, and it's a part of my activity at the moment as well.
Yeah, thank you, Olga. We will talk about the Coordination Council, but also about the role of women in the protests. And let's hear from everybody else, but I would also like later to pick up on that idea of difficulty, real difficulty of explaining Belarusian narrative to non-Belarusians.
And to continue answering the question, I would say my best, the most important contribution I have done so far is I cry every day. It's my civic duty to cry at least 15, 20 minutes per day. And I would say, yeah, you were right to say that everybody tries to do as much as possible. And also every person that I talk to thinks it's not enough. And also, if you have been injured or attacked by the police, you were detained. After you leave the jail, you also say normally like, "Oh, I was lucky," but all the rest were not so lucky. And it really shows how solidarity in this society is working. And you wish to make everything possible, but the limits, your personal limits, are quite strict. And I would say last month it's a hell. I mean, every day you just prepare for the next march, you help people who suffered, you try to raise funds, you try to talk to media, you try then to explain foreign media, and it's like you try to help people to escape from the country if they are in if their security is in danger, and so on and so forth. And I would say the current situation has shown that a real horizontal nonviolent protest is possible and necessary in 21st century. And I'm quite really proud of it. And yeah, thanks.
I really do. You know, when I think about participating in this movement, I start remembering all these communist slogans. От каждого по возможности, да? Как бы, which one was it, Valzhyna? Everybody contributes the way they can, and then, you know, everybody gets paid, you know, not equally. But I mean, everybody's so engaged. You know, I was, as an artist, of course, as a filmmaker, I actually got involved supporting people who never made films, you know, to try to make films, or you know, people who did sound suddenly decided to make video, you know, and I felt like I was more a facilitator than a leader, because I do a lot of leading in my personal projects, and that's what I felt like that was the most interesting part of it, was like everybody is a leader and everybody can generate ideas, and you just try to help whenever, you know, because you get a lot of people reaching out to you for various initiatives, and you have to pick like, oh, this one I could do, this other one I can't do. You know, I since I'm based in New York, the American Belarusian diaspora was really active, and so I'm personally involved in a number of initiatives, and some of them are not like, some is secret, non-public, but you know, there are, you know, people who have political connections who are trying to make a difference in raising awareness. And gaining certain political momentum, for instance, even in this country, in US. And in Minsk, I found myself, you know, gathering a lot of narratives in order to distill it. And I just recently made a project where it was more of a poetic take on what's happening, to try to like get it through me and get it out also through a pop culture way, where it also raises awareness with groups that might not be otherwise engaged politically with our cause.
I live in Germany since almost 5 years, and actually, when all these election campaigns started, I was here in Germany, and I had a concert close to Berlin in the middle of June, and this was maybe the last concert in the pandemic before the whole summer for me. And somehow I was looking for some rallies in Berlin, and I didn't find a good one. So unexpectedly for myself, I organized one. And so I started to be a political activist, absolutely unexpectedly for myself. And after this rally, we organized another one and another, and then it went on. It's still continuing. And now we're in process of organizing an organization which will be a kind of bridge between Belarusian and German societies. And all what we have done in the last 2 months or 3 months was something between a lot of and nothing. We communicated with politicians from German or European Parliament. We communicated with press. We organized all these rallies and so on. And we tried to influence the German or maybe even at least Belarusian society with our actions. And since August, I was in Minsk. I came back some days ago, and what I've done in Minsk was also kind of absolutely normal political activism or just civic activism. And suddenly, some days after the elections, there were a lot of musical activities, and then I took part in all these activities, or almost in all these parts.
Yeah, and me, as a photographer, I try to document as much as I can. So I always think that I don't do as much as I can, as Andrei said. And also, as a citizen of Belarus, I sign some papers and applications which may help to solve this problem in the law sphere. Though by now it doesn't seem that it can be solved in the law sphere because all the laws are broken. Yeah, and also I write some letters to those who are in jail now and so on.
Thank you so much. You have brought up things that I'm looking forward to discussing in greater detail. So let's just go perhaps one by one about the things that I've been making notes of. Olga brought up this difficulty of explaining Belarusian narrative. And that's something that I have struggled myself, usually sounding really chaotic and messy and all over the place, trying to explain every little nuance while being faced with usually expressions of disbelief. So I would like to ask about what has been described as uniqueness of Belarusian protests and Belarusian situation. Generally speaking, Belarusian historical narrative doesn't fall easily into preconceived formulas. Understanding Russia or Ukraine doesn't automatically help one to understand Belarus. Why do you think it can be so hard to explain what's happening in our country? And why do you think it is often so difficult for others to understand it? What is the problem with our narrative? Or rather with the audience of the narrative, with the international audience receiving it? Any thoughts? You see, it's a difficult question to begin.
Well, yeah, Valzhyna, it is really difficult. I mean, of course, you start thinking about history and historical factors, and I'm sure Olga and others will jump in. But even on the surface, you know, as you think about it, yes, you know, it opened borders for tourists, and last year it became easier to travel. But I mean, in the past 20 years, it wasn't like this wasn't the country that was so open to having others come in and you know, mythologize it also as the other. It was like, you know, we're this weird thing and we don't welcome outsiders. I mean, I felt like this is, you know, one of the maybe factors that's not mentioned. and of course historically also, like, we lagged in many historical processes, even as a part of the Soviet Union. I feel like we industrialized quite late, and had our national awakening quite late. So it doesn't, you know, I mean, like, if you look at the region from the point of view of, like, okay, there's hegemony, there's this Russia, Ukraine that you hear so much, like, it doesn't follow the same rules. But, you know, and if I were an American coming in, and you know, how many programs do we have learning Belarus language? You know, like, there are no Belarus studies, so there's just not enough, like, also information. There's not enough the space where you can reflect on something. Is it's just like this blank spot on the map.
I can say, yeah, we have in Belarus authoritarian regime, and this regime is very strong. And then people think we need a strong answer of this situation. And we have another answer. We have whole society, not leaders. We have horizontal structure. We have women, first of all, or a very important part of this protest and movement are women. It's not about nation. It's about democracy, first of all. And yeah, all of this is something other that other in other countries can understand and describe as revolution. We have other sort of resistance and other answer of this strong, of this difficult situation.
It rings so true, right? Because for decades, everybody was waiting for a strong answer to Lukashenko, but the answer came rather in a form of weakness almost, right? And that's very hard to describe. So do you have a strong opposition leader? Well, really, we have a housewife of somebody who wanted to be a presidential candidate, but then he went to jail. She didn't want to run for presidency, but then she decided that she wanted to. And for instance, when I was writing my op-ed for the Times, I felt how the editor wanted to say that Tikhanovskaya fled, right? Because that logically comes out of the narrative. She runs on weakness. Then once detentions and torture begins, she should flee. She should be fleeing. That's logical. But she doesn't flee. She's been fled, so to say. So it's strange when you insist on weakness, while actually every action that she does proves strength and courage.
And maybe, Valzhyna, if you let me to elaborate a little bit on this topic, that's something I think about quite a lot, and exactly how to describe the context, the general context of this country to any foreigner. And I would say the most important thing is to really understand that this is a post-colonial narrative. This is a post-colonial optics that other countries recognize us. And the truth is, last 200 years, Belarus used to be a normal buffer zone between Russia and Europe. And we were torn into pieces, then we tried to gather us back as a nation, and we were refused to do so. So it was just historically a huge mess last 200 years, and we never failed to uprise with a success. I mean, we had a lot of uprisings against Russia last 200 years, and then we tried to protect our sovereignty and our borders as a national state in 1919 after the fall of Russian Empire, but we failed again. And you know, this whole it was like a constant failures, no story of success for us, unfortunately. And it gives me also a perspective. You should think about it from two perspectives. First of all, it's a disadvantage because nobody cares about us. we are slaves of Putin last 26 years, because Lukashenko obviously is a, he even calls him his master and his older brother and so on. And thus we are not exactly a political object, not a political subject. We are exactly the object. And that's why it's quite easy to objectify us. Like, okay, Belarusians, it's these poor people who try to fight this dictatorship, but they constantly fail. Okay, so we have a clear pattern, a clear box to put it in. And also important to mention that it gives us also a huge advantage. It's like on one side, we are the outcasts, and on the other side, I would say this 26 years, it's for me like a political, social, anthropological experiment what we have here, because it's also clear that this dictatorship is not exactly the military cruel regime which oppresses the majority of the country. It's not true, because the majority of the population was mostly comfortable with it. And it's a clear civic pact, civic contract, civic, yeah, what do you have? You when both sides agree on something, yeah, it's a contract. And it has clearly 2 points. First point is stability, not prosperity. Lukashenko has never promised prosperity. He just offered stability. We will be equally poor and equally happy, something like that. And the second point is security. In 26 years, not a single soldier from Belarus took part in any military conflict around the globe. Even though we are such friends with Putin, our soldiers never came to Chechnya, to Syria, and so on and so forth. And up till now, this political civic how it's called, contract was acting. And only now, after the elections, it cracked down, because violence against your own people, massive tortures, massive repressions, yeah, it broke this social heaven. And yeah, one last thing I would like to add here is really, we are not so much affected by nationalistic ideas. Somehow Lukashenko claims that he is an orthodox, how it's called, orthodox atheist, orthodox atheist, and it's a clear message that the power of the church, neither Orthodox or Catholic, is here not how it's called, not relevant. He will not let the religion to take power, to get stronger. And at the same time, when he was pushing down our culture and language, which I find very disappointing, of course, and at the same time, what was happening is the national identity of Belarusians was really transforming into something new. And I read some philosophers and some ideas, for instance, Valzhyna Mort, he's really writing a lot about a post-nation concept. And I think really I would agree with him that Belarus is the place for a new concept of a post-nation. And that's anthropologically and philosophically is quite interesting. So I don't know if it helped to understand the context, but thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. This was really wonderful contextualizing. And I think that also Olga brought up the fact that the protests are not nationalistic in nature, they're pro-democracy protest. And now you're talking about the kind of history of failed nationalism in Belarus. And by now, I prefer actually to see it as something positive in Belarus. I think that maybe Belarusians whose cultural roots have been multicultural, multi-religious, multilingual, have always been kind of above nationalism. Maybe we recognized already then the danger of this nationalist movement, and we chose to stay kind of as people, as neighbors. I wonder if Vitaly and Tanya would like to add anything to this question on of narrative right now, or we could, Vitaly showing me that we could move on.
I could just add something shortly. I think we had not that often the chance to become a nation, and that we had not that often the chance to declare us as a nation. And it's like a kind of combination between we chose this way and we were obligated to go this way.
Yeah, and lots of people say that this revolution is a war between goodness and evil, and it is well shown in different spheres. And I guess that during this protest, only now we have realized, we are starting to realize who we are, and we understood that we are really good, we are really calm, peaceful, and we have a good sense of humor, we're ironic, and so on. And when I hear phrases like, why don't you go with guns to fight with police? I just don't believe that we can do it, because we're showing our best now, and we cannot make such a betrayal to ourselves to show that we are bad in some ways.
Thank you. Olga, I see your microphone on, so I'll turn the question to you now. Personally, it should be worth perhaps mentioning that Belarusians are also the partisan people. We are a country of very successful partisan movement in the 20th century during World War II. And now when we talk about these so-called leaderless protests and protests in which everybody takes responsibility to be a good citizen, to show the best side, it would be a shame not to mention that there are in this system that does not allow any opposition. They are forming these groups. One of them is Coordinating Council, for instance, that are trying to take real political steps in order to bring change. So I would like to ask Olga, who is a member of the Coordinating Council, what can it do in this system built around not allowing anybody to do anything? Could you talk about that a bit?
Oh, there is a very difficult question, because the first idea of this council was to help in dialogue, to make possible a dialogue, maybe not with Lukashenko, but with society, with partner and international partners, with Russia as possibility. But in 1 or 2 weeks, we understood that Lukashenko doesn't want dialogue, and it's impossible to, not Lukashenko, but we don't have a possibility to organize dialogue with these system structures. And at the moment, the idea is to represent our society as whole, maybe, but it's through different ways, through different groups. Of course, we have different working groups. I'm in the feminist women group at the moment, and the idea is to connect, to help with connecting within these groups and within different social groups, and to clear interests of different group, problems of different groups, and to look for dialogue in the society, to look for ways how we can fight for democracy in this peaceful way, of course. And it's open, of course. It's horizontal structure, and it's looking for ways how we can work and what we can do, I would say, in this way.
Well, we're rooting for you. Yeah, it's a great responsibility and burden and impossibility, it seems. Against hope. You mentioned women and the role of women in the protest. I would like to ask you, Olga, and everybody else. Certainly, I'm following well our journalists, but also a lot of the Western press, and I see that here the role of women is really emphasized. At one point, it was called the revolution of women wearing white. And there are certainly lots of photographs of Belarusian women wearing flags, white, red, black, depending on the theme of the protest. Belarusian women holding flowers in front of the rows of riot police. What is the role of women? And I will also say immediately that I am really cautious from my ivory tower here in American academia, because I was born a few years before the Chernobyl catastrophe, and I remember going around with my first readings internationally, and in whatever town I would arrive, there would be an exhibition, a photo exhibition of children of Chernobyl happening there. Or people would tell me, yes, we've seen those children of Chernobyl on TV or in photo albums. And it always felt a bit objectifying, this gaze, this staring. And now I see the faces of these women again, often on the front pages of foreign media, which is something that, well, we've been waiting for from our space of invisibility. And probably all of us always wondered whether it would be torture and blood and murder of innocent people that would get us on the front pages of international media. But now I look at the faces of these women and I think some of them could have been those Chernobyl children. And now again, the world is staring at them. And before that, they also stared at them, well, in a very sexualized way because of sex tourism that was so popular. So I wonder how you feel about this moment when women seem to be on the forefront, but at the same time, there's a lot of looking and gazing and adoring beauty and courage without kind of anything constructive that can happen in their support, or perhaps it can.
Valzhyna, was it for Olga?
Well, for everybody. It's for everybody, yeah.
I'm so excited by women on the streets, actually. You know, I don't know, maybe I am also, you know, objectifying them with my female gaze. But this is like the empowering, unique moment in this revolution, and why it's also so hard to talk about it and oh my God, and explain it is because, you know, we live in the male gaze, right? And this objectifying gaze is patriarchy. You know, I'm going to talk a little bit more from the feministic standpoint. Right, and that's why this revolution doesn't fit into this box, because it's not a part of this logical. I'm going to have a strong leader. You know, the logical connection of cause and effect, right? If it's decentralized and everybody can participate and everybody can be a leader, it's more like, you know, teamwork. It's more like women think about community and society, community, even in the, you know, in the prehistoric ways. I don't know, Native American ways. So we are a team, and we're very flexible, and we're like water. And, you know, impulsiveness actually, you know, going to these protests in Minsk, being impulsive actually really worked as you know, because in even some, you know, I'm curious about from Tanya, because some of my photographer friends talked about listening to their intuition in a very woman-like manner, you know, like in a different language. It's not the language of like, I'm a strong leader, I'm going to lead this task and I'm going to complete this task. It's like I'm listening to where I'm smelling the danger, and I'm going to go with the flow to protect, to you know, because in a place of no rules, that, you know, you basically have to rely to something, some other new logic, you know, and maybe that's female logic that's you know, saving them in a way, and getting them to the success to the successful protest, successful completion of their task. So I've been very excited about this new take that also just not from the gaze point, but, you know, comes from the inside of this revolution. And in terms of gaze, of course, you know, we're not looked at as victims. We're looked as you know, we're not you know, as you would say, objects, we're subjects now. So of course you get a whole different, you know, a different take, you know, and then I'm please look at look at us having our own way, you know. I'm happy to multiply these images and actually promote it in this way, because I think that's an empowering gaze, and you know, and it's deconstructing the usual take on what we could do as women in a typically male political space.
May. So I think the first 3-4 days of our protest were actually not that female. Yeah, it was a kind of civic war between 9th and 11th of August, at least. Yeah, and actually the role of women became that important from the 12th of August, when we have seen all these pictures of violence, when we have seen all these terrible events when they were happening in prisons. Yeah, and the role of women, in my opinion, was a kind of role of people who were not able to keep silence, who were not able to just to see that, because almost all of these people, you know, mostly women, as you say, were probably completely apolitical figures before. Yeah, and this reaction was actually the indignation of on all this violence. Yeah, and you know, in these 3 days, I think 6,000 or 7,000 people were detained. Yeah, and these were mostly men in 2 or 3 prisons in Belarus, and the women brought completely new energy. Women brought probably something what men cannot show, something maybe, you know, it's nice to say some about love or beautiness. Yeah, as you explained as well, maybe men would be ashamed to express some of these emotions which are completely sincere, and this is kind of new motion, new ideas for our society. And this was like this weakness, as you said, which became the strength.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to stay with this idea of images and turn a question to Tanya, a photographer. Tanya, you were a famous photograph taken by you a month before elections, shows these grandmothers, babulas, selling flowers on a busy street, groups of young people hurtling around. We know, Belarusian people know what is behind this frame, which is to say that police dressed in civil clothes have just grabbed people from the street. We already openly call these grabbings kidnappings. So I would like to ask you about images that have made Belarus visible for the first time. What stays outside of the frame these days? What do you search out with your camera? What is so important for you to document right now?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, you know, this summer is the first time I work as a news photographer and a war photographer, and it's a very new feeling to me. And now I'm not afraid to say that sometimes I'm scared when I see these warriors, these people in black and olive dress. And I don't know how it happened, but till now I still have almost no photos of all this cruelness. I don't know how it happens that when all these harpoons happen, I'm somewhere not there. And all my photos are about documenting some events, some emotions, some gatherings of people, and so on. And for a long time, I didn't even try to think about any projects. I'm just documenting what is going on, and I will think about it later, what I have shoot. And only some days recently I have started making a photo project about one brave old woman called Nina Baginskaya, and I'm following her quite often. And I want to make a photo story about a brave woman who is fighting for freedom for 26 years, if I'm not mistaken. And also these days I'm also focusing on some small things that people make. For example, they paint different benches in white, red, white colors. They put their dress outside, and that's how they show their protest. They put different stickers in the streets. They draw something, and I have quite a big collection of, the wall protests when walls say something, and maybe it will become some story, because it's not only the protest is not only going on the streets when people come there, but it is also the city speaks to us when people make something with it.
Thank you, Tanya. Tanya mentioned Nina Baginskaya, an activist who has been protesting, often been the only protester for decades. And I would like to turn now a question to Andrei and discuss the history of various resistance movements in Belarus. The problem of human rights, police brutality, refusal to open investigation into acts of violence, denial of a right to gather, and freedom of speech is a daily struggle for LGBT community in Belarus. The protests right now are described as all-inclusive, yet we understand that people demanding free elections might see the future of Belarus quite differently. We know that traditionally Belarusian political opposition insisted on a Christian conservative Belarus. A friend of mine commented on the detention of one such oppositional political prisoner. Even though he thinks that people like me deserve death, I think he deserves to be released. I wish him justice. LGBT has a long tradition of grassroots resistance in Belarus. And yet a picture of two women kissing in front of a row of riot police has received mixed opinions on social media from Belarusians protesting right now. So Andrei, I want to ask you, what do you think, is it that the rest of the country is learning about the LGBT movement these days and its tradition of resistance? What does it feel to be a part of this powerful, amazing protest and at the same time to be marginalized by it?
Thank you, Valzhyna. And of course, the most essential knowledge one could imagine at the moment is really the concept of intersectionality, for instance, intersectional feminism. And during our discussion, I would also maybe later comment on some points. But if to talk about the topic of human rights violations in Belarus, it's a normal strategy, divide and conquer strategy. You make all the social group feel isolated and frustrated. You do not allow different groups to organize, to mobilize even inside, and it's done. It's a very simple recipe of a dictatorship. And what happened to us last 2 decades, it's really, I would say we saw this this coming. I mean, for instance, just very simple examples. There is a normal reality of police raids to gay clubs. Like you have a normal party Saturday night, and then 20 cosmonauts. That's how we call them now. This riot police in helmets. They get in and they become your authority for next 4 hours. They demand you to stay calm. If you ask questions, they beat you. They use homophobic slurs in regards to you, towards you, sorry. And you are not allowed even to go to the restroom. They demand you to stay on the dance floor for 4 hours, for instance. And what they also do is they collect your IDs. So there is no such legal procedure. It's completely illegal. The only thing they can do is to check whether you are adult, I mean 18 years old, and that's all. But what they do is they really write down all the data, and they have this cartotek, how it's called, a special database with LGBTQI people in order later to put some pressure on you, to blackmail you. Either you want to go to some public service or you have a business, and they want to have some dirt on you, and they might threaten you to how it's called, to out you, to make outing for you, that you'd not like to openly be you know what I mean. So, and it's also, I would say, this toxic masculinity and this whole patriarchal thinking is still dominating in the society as such. And unfortunately, I don't think that the society had learned anything from us. And I'm really looking forward. I really anticipate this moment when finally different social groups will start to connect and to exchange the experience. But that's something that, in my opinion, never happened before. And it's also about the general level of education. And for instance, 6 years ago, when I became an LGBT activist, I realized in Belarus, there are so many or none as such any tools for change, like for legal advocacy. You cannot change any law because they will kill your law on the very beginning. And that's exactly happened with the domestic violence law last year. There was a nice draft, and then Lukashenko said he has beaten his son himself and it's fine, and it was dead. So all the attempts to make legal change, to make some legal changes, it's not possible here. And I was really frustrated, and I realized it's about raising awareness and talking to normal people, actually, because it's also when we think about this general situation at the moment, I might be quite upset, like, why only now the majority of the society realized what is going on? Because that's not a new development at all. The level of violence just became super high. It really touched a lot of people, not only some marginal groups. Like, for instance, I tried to talk to a lot of independent democratical politicians last, I don't know, 6 years, and I constantly heard from them like, we would like to support you, but we don't see you, we don't hear you. Please organize better, mobilize better, show us and give us your voice, and then we will support you. And I was like, come on, what are you talking? We need your support, and then we will organize. Yeah, and that's also in regards to death penalty, and it's also relevant for the United States as well. Like, obviously, if there is no clear understanding of the importance of human rights, then the majority of citizens might at some point agree on death penalty, for instance. Yeah, if we talk about such an educational process, I think it's quite necessary for every single country, of course, because human rights and democracy and freedom, it's not something you might achieve. It's something that you constantly work on. It's a process. And for instance, I would like to think, of course, into the very core, and toxic masculinity and patriarchal thinking is our joint, our key priority for every single person who is fighting for democracy and freedom. We should really start shifting our minds, our mindsets, our whole, how it's called, maps of values, and everyone should become feminist, everyone should become pro-LGBT, because otherwise it's like a endless circle. You fixed something on the legal level for LGBT equality, for instance, but then it didn't actually create change on the very cultural horizontal level in the society. That's why hate crimes can happen in any big city, in any Western country, because the law doesn't change your attitude, and we should really try to talk and to connect to each other. And yeah, if we talk, thank you, Valzhyna, for helping with pictures. I'm quite proud to see that 2 weeks ago and last week it was a pride, it was a queer column on the normal Sunday Freedom March. And I also wrote a column for Politico where I tried to explain also the complicities of the situation, because if you make such a step, if you appear in public, and especially on such a demonstration with a rainbow flag, you become a target not only for the police, not only for the special forces and riot police, but also for your fellow participants. And I did it on 16th of August, first time. And it was important for me to show that I'm actually here to claim the rights for public space, and that I'm part of the protest movement. And I had a lot of conversations, not very pleasant ones, like get away, get rid of this flag. It's not your agenda now. We fight for new elections, and we will talk later about any other topics. So stay out of here and so on. And again, education and culture is the key, I would say.
Thank you so much, Andrei, for this. This is really important. And you've brought up domestic violence. And I want to ask everybody, this is a question to everybody before we move on to musical protest. The domestic violence is often used as a kind of a metaphor for generally the relationship between our one-man state and the rest of the country. And we know that in an abusive relationship, it often takes quite some time for the abused person to figure out what is happening and to be able to act against it. Do you think, going back to women's participation, that there is some kind of triggering happening here with this open violence and abuse of power, and the understanding of a woman's position in a society where there are no laws to protect her inside, in her family, in her home?
Yeah, I would say it's very important, this connection, but I suppose that it's important to say about different kind of violence in different part of our society, against kids, for example, or elderly people, LGBT people. And of course, women are a very important group, but the problem of our society and of our regime is violence against all the groups of society. I would say that we have from our детства, from
childhood,
we have different forms of violence, this experience to be violent and to be loyal against violence. And I think that what we have now in our society, it's a feeling that people are against. And I said in different interviews that we have now, society is has a feeling that society is against violence, and our regime is like a 26 years ago. Our regime doesn't understand that violence is a problem for people. And we have this difference between society and new feeling in our society, and understanding of this situation by Lukashenko and people around Lukashenko.
Valzhyna, and yeah, it's interesting to see that this dialogue, the generational shift started, I don't know, we could say 4 years ago, right, with first Me Too, and how Me Too also was reflected in Eastern Europe. And I mean, a lot of the slogans that women are carrying that echo this metaphor of Lukashenko as an abuser, and the rest of the country is a victim. I do see that they're quite young, that they keep using this metaphor because they're the most educated, because they've been having conversations about, oh, I'm young and I'm dating and I'm in this really uncomfortable relationship. We did start redefining these boundaries of what's accepted and what we're looking for. I felt this shift generally, going to Eastern Europe for the past 5 years. Really, it's really quite different now, as in how we think about what's accepted again in the intimate space, and especially from young people. They communicate much better about their needs of where that boundary is. And so that's why I feel like that was on the surface, and it's now also on the streets. And it's wonderful to see this gender play, of course, that is constantly brought up in this context.
I really respond from the depth of my heart to what Olga and Daria, you are saying, because it's true. My generation was brought up to admire the bully, right? To admire that kind of violent strength. I remember that since kindergarten, those kids that were the bullies were used as a model for the rest of us. Andrei talked about how people are united right now across class, and how there should be this kind of intersectional solidarity. And it seems to me, I would like to turn my question to Vital now. It seems to me that music was able to find a very successful language in these protests. And I say as a poet with a little bit of envy, because the writers are struggling for the right words, but music, it seems, have brought people of really different ways of life together this time around. Vital, you have led musicians of the Minsk Philharmonics in protest concerts, plural, on the steps of the Minsk Philharmonics. The concerts were banned, but people since then have taken to singing everywhere. And speaking of class differences, professional musicians performed in front of industrial sites, industrial factories, in support of labor strikes. And the song that we played for everybody in the beginning of our discussion, Kupalinka, that is often referred to as a folk song, while in fact it was written by a Belarusian poet, Mihai Charot, a poet who was executed by the Soviets in 1937. It's a slow, melancholic song about midsummer. So it's not, it's really not much of a political chant, right? Yet people who sing it, those videos of people singing it in front of the rows of riot police, make a really powerful statement. So what is the role of music in this resistance? What is this singing of melancholic summer song, midsummer song, communicating, and how is music seems to be connecting people from various walks of life better than literature?
Yeah, first of all, I think that like literature and music as well, both are developing in time, and but music needs a bit less time than literature probably. And literature, actually, you have to read literature. You have to make an active act. Yeah, and now instead of literature, people actually read news from Telegram channels and press. So they actually had enough to read also without literature. And music is a kind of direct influence on the people. And music is something where you don't have to make an active acting, and where you just can listen to, when you just hear and trying to understand, or just to feel and just to perceive what is happening right now. And exactly there on this photo, this was world premiere of one new composition, which one composer, Olga Podgayskaya, has composed one day before this performance, and 2 days before this performance, one poet, Andrei Kadanovich, wrote the text. So I wouldn't say that the poetry, it was not important in all these protests. And for example, also some days after that, we had Yulia Timofeyeva, who was reading some poetry with our choir, and the choir just sang with closed mouths, and was making a kind of background where this poetry, the music of words, was actually the most important music where people were listening to. And I think that like the strength of music is this way of direct influence, and also music pieces are quite short. Yeah, for example, this Kupalinka song is takes about 3-4 minutes. Yeah, and as I said, Mikhail Charot wrote or made the new version of this text, and Vladimir Terauski, he composed actually this melody, which we know right now. And both of them were executed in 1937, 1938, but they reached somehow that this song became really important and absolutely, very popular. If you think about Belarusian traditional song, you always usually you hear inside of yourself this Kupalinka. And for example, the melody of Kupalinka is quite instinctive. Somehow these melodies, these lines are close to our, I don't know, it's close to our emotional sounds. If you are astonished or if you have fear, it sounds, for me at least, quite similar. Yeah, and it's tragic, yeah, but it has this strength in their tragicness, probably. Yeah, and it's absolutely opposite of all this violence of riot police. And we have all the whole August, we have on one side the violence, and the other side the beautiness. And I think the music with its directness is one of the symbol of this beautiness. And I also think that symbol is important in our summer resistance protests. And this is what you say, Valzhyna. We have the partisan experience in 20th century, and I think that's why symbol is also so important. Yeah, for example, I don't know, in election company of Tikhanovsky, we have a cockroach symbol. Yeah, and this is also important too. And after that, there's all these flags, white, red, white is a kind of visual symbol for us, and acoustic symbol, which you do not experience every day, actually, yeah, became these 2-3 songs. And firstly, we sang it in front of the Philharmonics. 2 last days, we sang it together with police, which just said us that all our events are prohibited and unofficial, so that's why we have to go. And sometimes it became a kind of modern art where police voice was combined with our music, and that's why it was much stronger as usual. And after that, we decided, it was absolutely spontaneously. I don't know actually who decided. I think nobody and everyone. Just to meet next day somewhere in some mall and try to sing, try to make flash mob. And always like 2-3 weeks until now, we have almost every day one flash mob, which takes about 5-6 minutes, which tries to unite people via music. And people listen to this Kupalinga or Mahutny Boże is kind of religious anthem of old Belarus, and or Pagonia is kind of official anthem of the old pre-Lukashenko Belarus, and they understand immediately what is it about. They do not have to think about it. They can just perceive. And I think the strength of music is in this directness. So that's why it became one of the symbols of our protest.
Thank you. And it immediately connects to what Daria was saying. I love that instinctual melody, right? It is something, it is the melody that we just can sing without knowing it. And Daria was saying about the fluidity of the protest, that it's like water, again, something, some kind of very archaic, pre-born, inborn feeling that people seem to be following right now. We have some questions that start coming in. I would ask my personal question to Daria before I open to more general ones, and then we close and allow everybody their sleep in these very, very demanding and taxing times. Daria, we mentioned filming. And I want to say that our riot police films protesters. I'm not sure how they're going to be using this. Here I have a picture, how they're going to be using this material. Perhaps it connects a bit to what Andrei was telling us about intimidation and building some kind of archive that can be used against you later. But what is the role of witnessing and filming in this moment when people are filming what they see as a gesture of personal testimony, while police is filming them for some intimidating archive? How do you see this situation where you find yourself as a filmmaker? You talked a bit already about moving out of your genre and then working with some people who are involved in film.
Yeah, Valzhyna, it's hard to redefine how do you create a new language, right? When everybody's filming, everybody's a director, everybody films with their phones, and then they're being filmed. And I found inspiration during women's marches that happened on Saturday. There was a group recently that decided to troll. Humor is a big part of this revolutionary movement as well, which I think is, connects to this very successful symbolic branding and fights this intimidation techniques really nicely. There was a group of women protesters that dressed as the opposite side, and they were carrying slogans like "I'm my own director," and so they trolled they trolled both sides because they did look intimidating to protesters as well. But they would film the soldiers, in balaclavas, filming them. They would really follow them, and there was a group of them of 5 or 6 women, and it turned into this just fascinating game of who's following who. And I mean, in terms of like this action, in terms of the art performance, I thought it was really quite successful because they were trying to turn the tables. And, you know, and visually also, you know, I think a lot about how do you construct a narrative that deconstructs this, you know, patriarchal, I'm the director, I'm the leader. Yeah, you know, my first thought was like, oh, I'm going to engage more women or more directors into this project. It has to be a team project, you know, and then I'm still struggling with it as they're all very busy, and actually like going and being present during this protest is already such a push, on such a physical push, that it's sometimes hard to be like, oh, maybe that's not the path we should follow in terms of, you know, gathering, trying to paint a picture of this revolution for the future generations. I'm being a little bit, you know, big with these words. So what I arrived to right now is, you know, gathering lots of people's stories and trying to distill it to some maybe an ensemble piece that could work. Maybe it's a hybrid piece that lives between documentary and fiction, or if it's fictionalized, it's based on real stories that multiple people tell.
Thank you. I think I'll try to now ask some questions that we have received as we are live right now. And one of them is from Irina Tjomkina, who says, my parents are from Belarus. I worked with lots of refugees from Chernobyl. Belarusian studies do not currently exist, true, but Ukrainian studies did not exist either in early 1990s when the Soviet regime collapsed. The Ukrainian scholars had to fight with the American academia to put Ukraine on the map. My question, considering what Valzhyna said about multicultural environment, and I was talking about the Grand Duchy of Lithuania there, what role do you think plays the fact that Belarus was established by Bolsheviks as a republic in 1919 with the strategic purposes? I'm actually not sure about the strategic purposes, but I wonder if anybody could answer this, comment on this question. It's true that when we talk about our independence, it's always other countries' purposes that come up and that are heard, and right now is not an exception. But I wonder if anybody, I'm not quite actually understanding the nature of the question. Maybe somebody could respond. What do you think is the role of the fact that Belarus was established? Well, Belarusian National Republic was declared briefly in 1919. I'm confused.
I don't know. I think that this kind of question about 100 years of our history, for me, there is this nationalistic logic. How our history can explain what we are and what we do. And I think that we have at the moment, we think not in this logic, but in the logic of our not long history, of our, I don't know, 10, 20, 26 years history. And I suppose that we must analyze first of all the processes of this not long history, and of their actual structures, peoples, communities. And we see that we have people, we have solidarity, we have new processes, and some processes are they are at the moment. they don't have history, and they don't have this long history, and we must analyze this near context. That's for me.
Yeah, I can also add some facts, like the only country from the former Russian Empire territory who gained independence was Finland. All the others, and Finland and Poland, sorry, and all the others were we all have our own unique paths. And it's true that Ukrainian historians and also musicians and also artists were fighting hard, and not only in the US, everywhere. It's a fight to return your own cultural and historical heritage to your country. And that's the process. It's also started for Belarus. And at the same time, it should not become really a fight. I mean, we know that we exist. We know exactly how our culture is bright and various. And slowly we will just tell more about it to our neighbors and to our friends. We should not say that it's a fight or a battle. It's really about enriching cultures of each other. And that's also about this nationalistic question of like heritage between Belarus and Lithuania, for instance. I mean, there are a lot of people in both countries who would start immediately to argue. Who was this duke? Who is this? Like, the history is constantly rewritten, and something is missing, and something is then being misused, being faked, and so on. So I would say we just really need to think about it as a productive dialogue, and we should be both able to share and to enrich our countries, our cultures, but not trying to make us enemies, something like that.
We have lots of new questions coming in, but I should say that I think we should wrap up in about 10-15 minutes. So there is a question about the PandaDoc CEO who has been, as we know, running this scheme in which law enforcement officers who choose to step down and not carrying out illegal orders would be given support when they resign, so they're not kind of left to dry without anything. So the question is whether you think that this kind of leverage of companies like PandaDoc can have real consequences, whether it's significant, and whether cultural commentators like yourselves could see yourself working together with somebody like CEOs of companies, and whether it would be some kind of significant solidarity, or perhaps it's already happening. PandaDoc is a software company, and from the last I've heard, 4 of its top managers were detained on made-up charges, while its owner is US-based.
Today I read some news that some other guy from IT sphere decided to continue this project of PandaDoc CEO. And while Nikita Mikada is out of this project, some other guy is continuing his project. So I guess it once again shows solidarity of our people.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is a lot of solidarity and a lot of spreading of information in a culture where we're used to invisibility. Information and is very important, but also used to propaganda, right? And a lot of it is happening right now too, with Russian journalists taking over Belarusian TV channel, the state-run TV channel.
Yeah, and it's maybe important to mention it's the same as for coordinational council. They try to push every single member of the council, and they try to make up some more and more prejudice. To put you into prison, but then your place is held by another person, and that's a chain reaction. It cannot be stopped anymore, because this coordination council, it now has hundreds of members, and there is a presidium, and then it will be formed. It's like a it's like a pyramid in a, I don't know how to compare it. And the same is with IT sector. A lot of people from IT sector are now how it's called, they are moving into another countries, and also after they leave, they will still they're relocating themselves. And even after they've been relocated, they will support the situation here. They will donate, they will organize, they will create some new, nice, incredible projects. And this is a very crucial part of the movement. That was our business card, IT. Belarus claims, I mean, the authorities claimed that we are an IT country, and Lukashenko even says that I helped you all to grow. I, with my own hands, created this IT sector. But yeah, it's a very strong tool for the fight.
Valzhyna, if I may ask, thank you, Andrei, for this very important answer to a very important question. Because we are going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. Should we perhaps ask the last question about the role of students, and even high school students, who just 2 weeks ago, as the world has seen it, were simply dragged out of classrooms on the 1st of September, the start of the new academic year, instead of being allowed to gather and actually start the academic year. So, Olga, of course, you work with students like on a daily basis, and I'm sure we would all very much like to hear, especially our students and Hunter who are watching it on YouTube, right? What it is like to be a student in Belarus right now, and what it is that the student movement contributes to the to what's going on.
We see students the last 2 weeks. In September we see students during September, and I would say that the students are the most visible group at the moment, because there is such a day, some meeting or some manifestation of students in some universities, and there are fighting with police, and students are touched,
tortured and hurt.
Tortured by police. We have today it's history by one student about torturing, and for me it was a new image of our students, because I'm working in the area of informal education, and we have in this area we have active students, and they were all the time very critical about formal education. And now we see that in these universities, students are understanding what are academical rights and human rights, and that students have voices and can struggle against this situation, and that students have solidarity. For me, it's a very good sign and a very strong group at the moment.
Thank you. is there anything else
Maybe I can also add some last point on students' movement, and one of the most crucial groups for this revolution is workers, and we have a lot of strike committees, and this is one of the hardest strikes for the regime, because normally they were pretending that normal people, workers, are supporting the authorities and so on. And of course, the second fortress is universities and schools. And what was also not mentioned before, that women's leadership is not only relevant for the protest movement, but also for the system itself, because the most powerful soldiers of Lukashenko is actually women. We have almost 40% of women in the parliament, in the Chamber of Representatives. And more than 50% of all the middle management positions are women. And it's exactly the heads of electoral committees, they are mostly in schools, in universities, and it's all these positions are also normally, it's a female professionals who work there. And I would say that universities, and it's also related to the domestic violence situation, it's really, unfortunately, sometimes women also support violence, and unfortunately, it's really this. It's part of this patriarchal victim blaming culture that somehow there is two types of victims: the one who survived and adopted, adjusted to the reality. You know, after you've been tortured and so on, if you later agree to cooperate, you might even receive some privileges, some respect after you had this experience. And the other part, is a person who suffered from domestic violence, and he or she never adjusted to it, and it destroys you completely. And I would say what happened in universities, it's also kind of a form of domestic governmental violence, that students were really beaten up inside of the building of the university, and then their professors were even supportive towards special forces and riot police. And that shows how really sociologically complicated the situation is, because it's so society can approve the violence if it's visible and if it's between moreover equals, and then society cannot accept domestic violence. Domestic violence should be invisible, and that's how we can approve it, and to say, it's your private matter, we will not engage with authorities and the police and so on. You deal with your own private personal issues. And what happened actually is that in our homes, university is a home for students, it happened, I would say it's a real shift in the whole situation, because nobody ever before had beaten up students inside of the universities. And it's also clear that strike committees amongst the professors and students gathering together, it's one of the most dangerous power that can really support the process and to elaborate and to strengthen and to increase our potential. So it's a very important part. Thanks.
Yeah, and can I say one lovely moment which I saw on September 1st? Here in Belarus, our students start the university year on September 1st, and our protests started on August 9. So it was like a third or fourth week of protests, and we all were kind of tired. And then there is September 1st, and lots of students come from all over the country, and we see that there is a huge amount of new protesters, but they're not. They don't really know how to act in the streets. And I saw such a funny situation when some groups of students were going on the street, and there was raid police from one side, from another side, and some old ladies came to students and said, "Hey guys, you should not walk alone. You should go in groups, otherwise you'll be caught." And it was such a lovely solidarity that such old generation told to new generation how to protest. I never saw it before.
May just my 2 cents about students. As Tanya said, about 1st of September, at the beginning of the academic year, some administrations were prepared to face possible protests of students. So for example, what I know exactly, the Academy of Music just declined all permissions of students to come into the building, and all students except for first year students were not allowed to come in the building on 1st of September because they wanted to protest, and the administration knew it. And it represents for me actually the whole image of our society right now. So the administration or the authorities are trying to stop it. And they think that, for example, 9th and 11th of August are enough. You can block internet, you can just make lockdown for 3 days and everything will be fine again. Yeah, and the same happened on the 1st of September in some of universities. And we see that students are keep protesting right now. And it represents also in some different perspective, the same process which are still happening since 9th of August.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really inspired by all of you, and I love you all, and I thinking of you all the time. Thank you so much for being with us here. Perhaps this is a good time to say that we do stand in solidarity with our students, with everybody who is in prison right now, with everybody who might end up in Belarusian jail in the days to come. There is an interesting comment we received on YouTube that asks whether Belarusian horizontal resistance movement has any similarities with Black Lives Matter here in the US, which is also maybe a good time to say that Belarusians stand in solidarity with all people everywhere around the world who are fighting for their democratic rights these days in US, in Hong Kong, and in other parts of the world. Thank you so much. I had many more questions. Please tune in to every talk with Belarusian activists that you see advertised. You see there's so much to learn, so much to hear. Keep Belarus in your hearts. Thank you so much, guys. Дякую велике.
Дякую. And on behalf of Hunter College, let me just thank you once again. And it's been incredibly enriching, and it will keep providing at least food for thought for us for the months to come, and for our students as well. Once again, thank you, Valzhyna, and everyone.